Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee with Mr. V. Apologies for this one being slightly later than normal. Today we're going to look at monopolistic competition. So hot on the heels of perfect competition, monopoly and oligopolistic, we're now completing the set and we're doing monopolistic competition. So in order to participate with Coffee from Mr. V, you need a cup of coffee. If you don't have a cup of coffee, then go and grab a cup, a mug or a glass of your favorite liquid, and with me we'll do the synchronized sip. 1, 2, 3. I love coffee. So on with monopolistic competition. I have redrawn my spectrum going from perfect competition on the far right to monopoly on the far left. I've shown yesterday that oligopoly, I thought this is not a pure science, a black and white science where we know exactly where oligopoly starts and monopoly begins. And similarly, with monopolistic competition, don't really know exactly where oligopolies finish and monopolistic competition starts. Word of warning at this point, make sure whenever you talk about this particular market structure, you're always using the full phrase, monopolistic competition. If you talk about a monopolist, you're talking about a monopoly, a firm in a monopoly over there, okay? It's very difficult language, quite technical. So always do yourself a favor, stay safe and talk about monopolistic competition. As you can see, it's probably the largest part of the spectrum, okay? And again, there's an overlap here with oligopoly. So this is the most common market structure that you are likely to see in the world. Good examples of markets like this would be restaurants, hairdressers, anything in where there are lots of firms. They have slightly differentiated products, and probably what you'll find is as you go from here over there, the differentiations become more obvious. Okay, there are slight differentiations here and slightly more differentiations there. Imperfect information and low barriers. So really, we want to be thinking about a market structure to kind of give us a good comparison to oligopoly. You need to be thinking about a market structure over on kind of this side, one step in from perfect competition. Hence, there's a lot of similarities between this and perfect competition, the idea of lots of firms, the idea of low barriers. The only big difference, well, as well as the perfect and imperfect information, is the differentiated products. If you go back a couple of episodes and look at perfect competition where I talked about homogeneous goods, I gave you the example of the shoe, okay? It was a fictional, hypothetical example. You never really have that situation in which all firms are producing exactly the same shoe, but nevertheless, it worked for the purpose of what we were doing then. One step in then onto monopolistic competition, we will allow firms to make slightly different variations of the shoe. Okay, so no longer is it the shoe, but now you have branded shoes. You have George's shoes, you have Inace's shoes, you have Morgan's shoes, you have Melanie's shoes. You have all different types of shoes, different colorways, different cushioning, if they're trainers, different leather types, if it's proper shoes. You get the picture, okay? These are different shoes now, not just the shoe. So let's go straight to our diagram, because everything in economics ends up a large one because there's quite a lot to do with the diagram today. So price quantity, and this time I'm going to draw a relatively elastic, but not perfectly elastic. It's not perfect competition after all. Demand curve. Now the reason it's relatively more elastic than, say, compared to monopoly or oligopoly where they were inelastic, is now there's plenty of substitute goods. Okay, there's plenty of alternatives, and there are only slight differences between the two. So if you don't like George's shoes, let's say that again, of course you like George's shoes, but if George decides to put his prices up, then you might go and buy your shoes from somewhere else. However, some people are going to carry on buying George's shoes. So to some degree, there is an element of brand loyalty, just not a huge amount. Okay. Again, think about the kind of market structures we were talking about before, restaurants, hairdressers. If one restaurant puts their prices up, then it doesn't mean that they'll lose all of their customers immediately, because maybe they're the only Indian restaurant, or maybe they're the only Italian restaurant. So just because they put their prices up, people might still want to go there because they don't like the food on offer anywhere else. Or maybe they just have a strong attachment to that particular restaurant. Or a hairdresser even. If a hairdresser is a particularly good or high quality hairdresser and they put their prices up, you might continue to go there. Or on the other hand, some people might choose to go somewhere else. My point is that if prices go up, you won't lose your entire market share, but you might lose a fair chunk. Okay, so elastic demand curve. We'll always draw these exactly the same way. The next thing is the marginal revenue curve. Twice the gradient. Okay, then we can think about our Nike swoosh-shaped marginal cost curve. Nike swoosh because of the law of diminishing marginal returns, which is kicking in here. MC equals MR, that's the important point. That's revenue maximization, okay, at Q1. We read up from Q1 to get to P. This gives us our total revenue for this firm. Okay, so they're making PQ. And finally, our smiley-faced average cost curve, whose minimum point goes through the MC curve. And to use this diagram for a little bit of analysis, we read up from Q1 to the AC curve and then read across. There's our costs, and there is the profit that this firm is making. And this firm, looking at it, is making some supernormal profit. Okay, so it's making positive economic profit. Okay, that's in the short run. What now? Well, let's just do a quick recap of our other market structures. In monopoly and in fact oligopoly as well, we said that in the long run, nothing changed. Okay, even though we're kind of walking around and we're seeing the capitalists, the people that own those firms, earning lots of money, driving their gold-plated Bentleys around the place, we can't go and compete in those markets because there were such high barriers to entry. In perfect competition, though, there were low barriers to entry. So if we see lots of profit being made in a particular industry, we want to get in on that act and we want to get some of that profit for ourselves. Monopolistic competition then tends to have more in common here with the perfect competition than it does with monopoly. In particular, this idea of low barriers to entry. So what's going to happen is that this supernormal profit, okay, I'm just going to call it SN profit in order to fit it onto my board, is going to incentivize new firms to enter the market. Okay, enter. So over in the industry, the supply curve is now shifting to the right, and that's going to reduce the price for things in the market, okay? But what it's going to do for this firm is it means that the demand for George's shoes, or let's just call it firm A, okay, will fall. That's because if you just had 5 restaurants on a high street and now there are 6, well, the same number of consumers are just going to be spread out amongst a higher number of restaurants. And so actually the consumers per restaurant is actually going to fall. The demand curve for any individual restaurant is going to fall. Or in fact, if 3 more restaurants enter the market and now Headington is kind of saturated with restaurants, then you can see that actually the number of consumers per restaurant is going to fall quite dramatically. So what we really need to do then is we need to shift the demand curve for this firm inwards to the left. So let's try and do that. So there is my new demand curve, D2, shifting to the left. Whenever you shift the demand curve, you're going to have to shift the marginal revenue curve as well. Okay, so there's my new marginal revenue curve. That gives us a new profit maximizing level of output, Q2. So Q1 has gone down to Q2. The firm is selling less of its output. Okay, the restaurant is selling less meals. George's Shoes is selling less shoes. That's because there is now more variations, more substitute goods on the market. So the demand curve for any individual firm has fallen. We read up from Q2 to the AC curve. and that gives us our new price. The price has fallen. Of course it has. There are more firms in the market that drugs. There's an excess of supply, so that drags the price downwards. We then read up to the AC curve, because MC and AC, by the way, haven't changed. There's no need to change MC and AC. Costs haven't changed. My costs are still the same. Just because new firms have entered the market, there's no reason to think that my average cost or even my marginal cost would change, so they're the same. I read up from Q2 to the average cost. Oh, it's a P2, so P2 is kind of C2. And what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm no longer making supernormal profit. It means that I'm just making normal profit. When AR equals AC, we know that that's where normal profit is made. So zero economic profit. This was the same conclusion that we reached with perfect competition. In the short run, we can make supernormal profit, SNP, right? That's just an abbreviation that I've come up with just now. It's not a normal expression. But in the long run, we can only make normal profit, okay? The supernormal profit is being squeezed out by new firms entering the market. They entered the market because of the supernormal profit, but because all of those firms are now entering the market, there's less profit to go around for everybody, and everybody will end up with normal profit. And when there's normal profit, then the market is in equilibrium. There is now no incentive for anybody else to join or indeed leave. Okay, so the market is now in equilibrium. Now that is quite a messy diagram. Okay, now I knew what I was doing because I've been doing this for 10 years, so I could manage to get it correct first time round. If you try and do this and you try and do it on a small diagram, chances are it's going to go wrong. So my suggestion to you in an exam is not to draw this on one diagram, but instead draw it over two diagrams. I'm going to show you now. Hopefully this will dry quickly. So in my short run, and again, notice how I will always draw this exactly the same way. Okay. In the short run, I didn't draw it the same way that time. Okay, make sure your profit goes in the right place. That's where the most common errors occur. Okay, there is my supernormal profit right there. Okay, that's just a monopoly diagram. It's just an oligopoly diagram. Okay. In the long run, however, what we're trying to show is that firms in monopolistic competition can only make normal profit. And this is probably the hardest diagram that you're going to have to draw in the entire 2-year course of A-level or IB economics. It's important to get it right. Everything up to this point, no change. Okay? So this is showing how the price has been determined with a demand curve and a marginal revenue curve. I suppose really what I should have done is I should have drawn the demand curve a bit lower. Okay? But never mind, let's not worry about that now. So what am I trying to do? Well, what I need to make sure is that my average cost curve touches this point. It doesn't want to go under the AR curve, because the point I'm trying to make is this is the profit maximizing point, but it's only normal profit that I can make. So if I was to go under the line, that would imply that at some points I could make supernormal profit, but that's not the case. This firm, the best this firm can do is normal profit at Q1, okay? At any other point, it must be making a loss. So the AC curve needs to be tangential there, but also don't forget that the minimum point needs to go through that MC curve. So the way I do this is I kind of draw a point on there so I know what I'm aiming for. And then here goes. Perfect. Okay, there is my smiley-faced AC curve and everything works. I'm making normal profit at the profit maximizing level. Now, looking at these two diagrams side by side, it really looks like what I've done is that I've pushed average costs up, and that's what I really didn't want to do. There is no reason to shift average costs, okay? Average costs have not gone up. But the point of doing the diagrams side by side is you don't get that very messy diagram that I had in the first place. And as I say, I've had 10 years worth of practice. I know I can get it right first time because I know where the common pitfalls are. But I also know that for students who are doing this for the first time, there are loads of potential flaws. And if you do it wrong, you've got to scribble it all out and start again. And there's no guarantee that you'll get it right again. So just draw them side by side. Okay, just draw them next to each other. We can try that again, taking more care over it now to show that what we're aiming for is a lower demand curve, so something like that, with our marginal revenue cost there, our marginal revenue curve there. We're not trying to change very much in terms of the marginal cost curve. And then again, I'm aiming for that point and that point. Right, now looking at that, that looks much better, because the MC and the AC are in more or less exactly the same place, but you can see a distinct change with the demand curve. That's the diagram you're aiming for. That's the one you need to practice lots and lots. The more you practice, the more it becomes muscle memory, and the more you don't have to worry about it in, time-pressured exam circumstances. So that is monopolistic competition in the long run. Normal profit. Let's very quickly do the efficiencies. We should be ninjas at this by now. So allocative efficiency, demand equals supply, which is there. So we are not allocative efficient. Productive efficiency, the minimum point of the AC curve is there. We're not producing at that point. So we're not productively efficient either. Dynamic efficiency has two characteristics. They need to be making supernormal profit, and they need to have the incentive to invest that supernormal profit in R&D. We can see from here that in monopolistic competition, they're only making supernormal profit in the short run. So you could argue that they are dynamically efficient because they will have the incentive to differentiate their product, innovate, come up with the latest new model. Okay, but on the other hand, they're kind of constrained by the amount of supernormal profit that they have. So for dynamic efficiency, I'm kind of giving it a half and half. X efficiency, there's not really much opportunity to be X inefficient here. The more that you're X inefficient, the more your average cost curve is likely to rise. The more your average cost curve rises, the more likely you are to make a loss. So I don't think there's much opportunity here to be X inefficient. I'm not saying they're as X efficient as perfect competition, but I'm also saying that they're not going to be quite as superfluous with their money as monopolies and oligopolies. So it's decent. Again, in terms of efficiencies, I hope you'll see that actually it's still true that as we're coming away from monopoly through oligopoly, monopolistic competition, down to perfect competition, efficiencies are getting better. And this is the point of doing theory of the firm and having perfect competition at that extreme. Our question, wouldn't the world be better? Wouldn't the world be more efficient? Wouldn't resource allocation be more efficient if we were over there in perfect competition? Again, think about allocative efficiency. This is, again, a market failure. Look, here is the welfare loss. All right, community surplus is not maximized. Right, very quickly, I had a question about oligopoly that I wanted to come back to. So the question was, how about if we get a question on game theory asking for us to come up with our own numbers? I'm just going to bring this up to the board. Okay, there is the generic game theory matrix that I have come up with algebraic terms rather than numbers. It's a prisoner's dilemma two-firm model. And I think the numbers we used yesterday were 50-50, 20-20, 5 and 80. Wrong, 80 and 5, 5 and 80 there. As long as you use these terms, and A is bigger than B, is bigger than C, and is bigger than D, it will work. So if you're ever asked to come up with your own numbers, take a screenshot of that and use that. That will work. Right, that pretty much sums it up for now. Thanks for watching again, and stay safe and take care of yourselves, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.